Anyways, all right, moving on to Nique the Big Red Dog, aka Nique Clifford. Coop is so pissed at that one. He's not very happy.
Hey, wait, no. How long have you been workshopping that? Just let the
No
audience know.
comment. No comment. No need for such slander on my name. After all I've done for the great people of Draft Twitter, this is what we're doing now. Draft YouTube now. Draft YouTube. We're YouTubers now. Anyways, Nique Clifford. It is short for Dominique, by the way. Just so we all know. Yeah, I mean, some really deep research in my bag. Nique Clifford, a guy who I remember because when he was playing for Colorado, he came up to WSU and he got a steal and he tried to dunk on F.A. Aboogidi, and Aboogidi sent that shit. It was one of the nastiest things I've ever seen in my life. Anyways, measured at the combine at 6'5" and a quarter, so basically 6'6", 6'6" and a half in shoes, with a 6'8" wingspan and an 8'6" and a half standing reach. He is like 2 guard size. That is important to note. His similar measurements. I believe a shorter wingspan than to someone like Contavious Caldwell Pope, and kind of guys in that realm. It's not to say he couldn't play the 3 in the NBA, but he is a 2 guard. I think, in my opinion, that this positionally in the NBA, he is most similar size wise to the shooting guards in the NBA. He is a February 9, 2002 birthday, so he's 23. His birthday is actually one day after mine. So we're finally talking about a player who is almost my age. Makes me feel much better. But he's 23. He will turn 24 about halfway through his rookie season. His rookie season will technically be his age 24 season. So he is borderline Duarte old. He is about to that age. He played 5 years of college basketball, started his career at Colorado before spending his last 2 seasons at Colorado State. As a super senior, in 36 games and 35 minutes a game, he averaged 18.9 points, 9.6 rebounds per game, 4.4 assists per game, 1.2 steals, 0.6 blocks on 49.6, 37.7, 77.7 shooting splits. He again had a very long productive career. It's important to note that basically every number improved basically every year, except from his sophomore to junior year. He took a little bit of a step down in terms of his scoring volume, but he's consistently taken more threes and made more threes. He's consistently been a better free throw shooter year over year. He's consistently been a better rebounder year over year, a better passer. This year, he took a huge jump from 3 assists to 4.4 assists from his senior to his super senior season. He's basically always improved. And then this year, some other notable stats. He had a 10.3 box plus minus, 116.6 offensive rating, 27.9 usage rate. It's important to note he had 7% higher usage rate than he did just last year. 56.5 effective field goal rate, 60.3 true shooting, 5.4 offensive rebound rate, 26% defensive rebound rate, 26.8 assist rate to a 15.8 turnover rate, 2 block, 2 steal rate, 37.3 free throw rate. He dunked 21 times. It's important to note the year before he did dunk 28 times in a smaller role. So he's pretty good athlete for his size. Shot well on close twos, 67.6, well on long twos, 45.9, and then again shot well from the free throw line. Took 175 total threes, 8.3 3-point attempts per 100, where he shot 37.7%. Everything is high volume. I want to start with the defense again here, even though I know that's not necessarily the sell the same way as it is for these other guys, but just because I want to keep the train rolling in terms of talking about the defense first. And I think Nique is interesting here because I kind of came in with some different expectations than I left with. And I know Stone is going to have some fairly distinct beliefs from the other two of us, I believe. So I just kind of want to quickly give my overall take, and then we'll break down individual chunks of it. I think he's a really safe bet to be a pretty solid all-around defender. I think he is not quite like elite, but he could maybe hit that like Neesmith level ceiling. I talked about, or I haven't talked about yet. Yesterday, I talked about in stuff you will listen to after you hear this. That I think it's valuable to use comps for defensive players because we often just think of defense as binary, good or bad. Are you a good or bad rim protector? Are you a good or bad perimeter defender? Are you good or bad at getting steals? Whatever. I think defense has types, and one of the easier ways to differentiate types is just give you some guys who kind of play like that. I think he's similar to Aaron Neesmith in that he has really good screen nav, and he's probably at his best guarding ones and twos, even though he's kind of wing sized. He would really struggle with guarding bigger, stronger guys, but he has okay length. Good for he plays longer than he is. I think he has good screen nav for someone his size, especially off ball, and he can really play on teams where they don't want to switch everything because of the screen nav being so good. He can just kind of keep matchups fairly well, and he's also really smart. He's a really good help defender, in my opinion, despite one pretty glaring flaw that we'll get to. So I think he's another guy where I don't think he's quite elite at anything other than I think the screen nav is maybe elite for someone his size, but I think he's a safe bet to be a good defender. Stone, I know you might feel a little differently. Where are you at with the defense?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily out. I think that there's both skills and deficiencies that both show promise, reason for promise and concern, is the way I would frame it. Where I think, coming into this, like I thought, as a two guard, I thought that I'd primarily view him as like a perimeter defender. I came away thinking much differently, where I have more concerns about him on the perimeter than I would like for someone that is predominantly a perimeter-oriented player. Like I think that the big thing is the hips are really slow. I felt like, and that's really apparent on closeouts where the opposite of Carter Bryant, and he's very, I think Bryce said earlier, cautious as a closeout defender, and that comes back to bite him. Where if he closes out too hard, he is not able to recover because the hips are so slow. So it leads to him being pretty cautious as a closeout guy. And then in that case, he's not closing out hard enough, and it's just a pretty wide open shot for a lot of times. So I think as a closeout guy, there's a lot of reason for concern for me specifically in that regard. I think that changing direction, again, because of the hips is difficult for him. If you have a strong ball handler against Nique Clifford, I'm pretty skeptical that Nique will be able to stay in front of them. I think the area that I'm most positive on with Nique actually is the fact that I think as a low man, he's like really rotationally crisp. He's stronger than he looks, and the hands are pretty good in that role. And we saw it. It wasn't as common, but we saw it, or at least I saw in portions of film where for spurts of games they would put him in that role, and I thought he was far more productive and looked much better as a low man guy, which is odd considering he's not the type of wing or guard you would typically view in that sort of role. But I thought it just it mitigated a lot of the perimeter concerns a lot better, and I thought it maximized what he does as an off-ball guy much better, where he's, as an off-ball guy, really rotationally sound. It seems like he's knows exactly where he needs to be, and he's not athletically limited in getting there. But I do have a fair amount of concerns with him on the perimeter against guards or wings. I'm not sure that he's just the level of needed lateral mover and hip change of direction guy that you need to be a positive in that kind of role.
I do think like guy who trails, off ball shooter around screens is a really valuable defensive role. I do think as much as we want to think about, just like traditionally guarding a pick and roll, there's so many more motion offenses that he's able to defend pretty significantly well because the motion shooters, there's not very many guys coming off a ton of pin downs who are 6'6" and bulky. Right. Jaylen Brown's not coming off a pin down and getting right into, his action. This guy's going to be like a Jordan Clarkson, more off-ball centered scorer, that kind of a way. And I do think he's really good at guarding those kinds of guys. The problem is the hips. And I do think that the hips work against him as an off-ball defender in a real way. Bryce, you said you really liked it. I think I disagree because he knows that he can't fully commit because he can't change direction and close out very well. So he's almost too timid on his digs and his help from the wings because he has to basically just dig and get right back out. He can't dig and then make a second effort or remove his hand and like really get in there and strip the ball from somebody. He can just kind of be annoying, right? And then he gets back out to his man. And I also do worry that his hand-eye coordination isn't like the toppest of top tier that you would need to be to make up for how limited his hips are. I think he's got long arms. I think he's got good instincts. And I think he knows his body. And I think that he knows how he has to defend. And I think it's really interesting that you talk about him as a great low man stone, because I think that when he has the time to kind of just move in one direction and do that kind of like, he's got the length and the athleticism to like kind of be a bother at the college level. And I just don't think that's something he's going to be able to it'll help. Obviously, he won't be able to be targeted. We talked about that last few pods. It's just that he's the kind of wing who you can just stash on a corner shooter and you don't have to worry about him just giving up free buckets to big men around around the rim. You can just get in there, contest, block shots, help, and then maybe do one closeout to his man. And by the time he gets beat on a closeout, the rest of the defenders have rotated back into position and you haven't completely collapsed the defense, right? And then he can, figure out where he needs to go. And I do think he's smart enough to make up for that. But he can't do that full time. He's not a full-time weak side rim protector, in my opinion.
I would agree. I agree with that point. And my point to him being a low man is more the fact that it's less concerning for me than him being on the perimeter. Not that he would necessarily be a positive as a low man. Like, I don't think he's going to be overly productive in that role. And that, for me, overall means the defense is more concerning for me when that's the case. Like, I don't feel good about him being a positive in either sort of role. And those are kind of the only two roles he's going to be able to fill, I think, at the next level. And I have concerns with both. So I, overall project him to kind of be not too good of a defender. And I feel like that's against the grain for a lot of people.
So I guess I am going to have to provide the positive spin because I think he still can be a good defender despite, and I want to be said, I agree with you guys that the hips are really bad and the quick change of direction is pretty rough. But I do think it's important to make a distinction between lateral quickness and hip mobility because I do think there's a difference. He is really quick laterally when he can pick a side and he's able to move kind of without having to flip his hips, right? If he can keep someone, let's say you're guarding a Jalen Brunson and you want to keep him on his right hand. If he can stay attached enough, even through getting through screens and stuff, which I think there's a world he can, that he could just sit on his left hand and force him right. Like he will be able to stay in front enough to be there to contest when he eventually pushes off for a step back jumper or whatever, right? And that stuff I think is potentially really good. And that's what I like about Nique defensively most is that I think he is both smart enough to kind of survive off the ball and he has the potential to be like one of the better point guard defenders in the NBA in terms of, obviously he's not a point guard, but in terms of guarding the other team's point guards. Because he's big enough to contest guys who want to be space creating jump shot shooters like Jalen Brunson, like obviously at the high end like a Steph Curry or whatever. But but he's also, quick enough and big enough, and he, even though he has some real issues with contact offensively, defensively he does an okay enough job absorbing contact, especially from smaller players, to also guard downhill threats like De'Aaron Fox or guys of that ilk. I'm not saying he's going to be elite. I'm not, and again, guys with like really, really high level handles, I maybe worry about him against, because if they can attack that top foot, he really struggles to open up. But I think he's really quick laterally. I think the screen nav is really good. His issue is that he struggles to open to his hip mobility looks really bad on closeouts, and he really struggles to open up quickly. But he even has moments where, like, even if someone can't attack that back foot, like, he can change direction so long as he's going laterally, but he can't open up to run and chase very well. And he can't he's not great in terms of how do I want to say this? He's not great in terms of if someone is able to attack that top foot and open him up. He's not great in terms of recovery, and you see that a lot when he's guarding pick and roll. When he does get hit, he kind of will do a chase, like he has to chase a lot, and then he will eventually do his dive back to the big to try and get a pocket pass, instead of being able to sprint in front and then reestablish his lateral quickness. Obviously a worry. But I do think there is enough there to like in terms of his on-ball defense. And I think specifically he's just really disciplined. Like, he's just, and some of this is he's older. And this is in stark contrast to someone we'll talk about on another pod, like a Thomas Sorber, who is talented but really undisciplined. And Sorber's obviously super young, but Nique is really disciplined. He's like doing the right thing without a ton of fuss about it, right? Like, part of why his low man rotations are good is because he knows when he can meet someone at the rim and when he needs to get outside the lane to meet someone. He is good enough at understanding, when he needs to just put his head down and run someone off the line, and when he needs to close out a little shorter and trust them to, make them beat him with a shot. Now, the truth is, he really struggles to try and run someone off the line and then get back to guard that guy. He has to peel switch almost all the time. But the NBA does a lot of peel switching anyways. Like I do think there is a little bit of, the NBA is more built to handle his weaknesses than college basketball, because in the NBA, you're generally playing 5 guys who are really smart and can adjust on the fly, or at least 4. And in college basketball, you're lucky to have 2. That's just the general truth of it. And so I think there's some stuff to really like there. I think he has a really good sense for playing the ball. I don't think the hand-eye coordination is great, but I think the reaction time is great. And so I think it kind of covers up for some of that. So I don't know. I like Nique defense. I don't think he's going to be like an elite guy, but I think there's at least a path there to him being a really valuable playoff defender, who, teams are maybe overpaying for if he's a good enough shooter. And let's transition to the offense then, because I think there's a lot of potential intrigue there with him as a dribble, pass, shoot wing. So, Coop, I'll throw this back to you. How did you feel about his kind of overall offensive game?
He's very smooth, right? He's got a lot of funk. Not really. I mean, he's kind of simple. He gets stationed in the corner, but he's got a lot of aesthetic funk to him, where it's like he looks a lot smoother than the move he's actually making. I think he's got really good footwork. He's really polished in the kinds of drives that he takes, but he doesn't really take that many kinds of different drives. He's attacking straight line or on like a slightly wide angle, getting around bigs, pinning them in space, making simple reads. I do think that, like, that idea of a dribble, pass, shoot wing is kind of what you're gunning for offensively. You're not getting a guy who's like running a ton of pick and rolls. He's not like a point guard bet of any kind. He's not making a ton of advantaged reads, but I think he can make connective passes well enough. And I think if you can just get him, he's really good at just like, he almost reminds me of like what I think Dylan Harper is really good at as a secondary guy, right? Where he takes 2 or 3 steps and he notices that a guy is out of position and he makes like a quick read to a shooter, or to the right guy in the corner. And for Harper, I worry about that because that's like the basis of his being a point guard, right? Is a lot of those kinds of reads, and he's not the level of shooter that a guy like Nique is. But for Nique as a quick decision maker and an off-ball wing, I think it's a really big plus. I think he just like makes the right read a decent amount of the time. He knows his body, he knows where he's supposed to go. He's good at coming off of screens. I think he reads his big men well. Nothing like there's no star level outcomes with Nique. There's no, oh, this guy's like he's not like Khan where it's like he's a guaranteed starter, but it kind of reminds me of when we talked about LeBaron Philon, where it's like this is a guy who can just get in and do a bunch of random shit pretty well, and he just attacks. And that's the kind of stuff that you need from your role players. And I'm a lot more comfortable, obviously, with his offense because he's a high usage wing who's going to be scaling back his usage to really fit on an NBA roster. But he's a pretty simple NBA translation, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel good about Nique's offense translating to being a positive. He's a dribble, pass, shoot guy, as Bryce said. But you'll notice one aspect that he didn't mention, which is the finishing. And if you're paying attention, there is a reason my nickname is what it is. It's a double entendre because Nique is a W, but also, unfortunately, he is weak. And that really puts a cap on the offense. Not that he can't be good, but offensively, there's some limitations. So I'll start with the positives. Like I do think that for me, there's a lot to like as from the shooting perspective. I think that he off the catch, I feel great about it. I think he's going to be a really good catch and shooter in the NBA. I think closeouts don't bother him a ton. I think he can attack closeouts fairly decently. He's not an overly complex ball handler, but he gets the job done. And I think that he can get himself in open positions for pull-ups off the dribble. There's off the dribble juice there too, even from three. I think there's some step back equity, side step equity, not to the level of like Yakachonis, but I think that there's some on-ball equity there with regard to just getting himself open in a pinch. I think that as a passer, I like his decision-making as a passer. It does feel like all of the pick and roll stuff that he does, it's never at full speed. Like he's never fully bursting towards the rim. It feels like he's trying to take everything a half step slow so he can slow down the processing for himself, it feels like. So that aspect does concern me a little bit and somewhat puts into question whether it can be like a full-time ball handler. Like I don't think he projects to be that anyway, but I think that is a trait that's lacking that does put the nail in the coffin, preventing him from being that. He has a lot of impressive moves as a driver to avoid contact, right? So this is sort of the double-edged sword where he's really good at avoiding contact and finishing because of it, because he can avoid the contact. And he's really got a knack for getting to the rim without having any sort of contact or resistance. The problem is that he has to do that, or he feels the need to have to do that. And when there is contact, he can't finish through it. Just plain and simple. Like it's a real limiting factor to his downhill equity. Where I think because he's a good off the dribble and pull up guy, like I think he could survive without that and be okay. But it's also going to be difficult for him to be a 3-level scorer if the finishing around the rim is so dependent on him being really good at avoiding the contact, which he is currently, but it's difficult to succeed as a finisher in that way in the NBA. I think that apart from that, like he just does a lot of really positive things, makes good decisions, your typical role player things that he's already shown he's doing, but obviously at a much higher level for Colorado State, and scaling down opposite of Carter Bryant, I think is going to be fairly easy for him to find a role and fit in. And you can use him in multiple ways, right? As like a secondary playmaker, as a guy that's just shooting off the catch, a cutter, a connector guy. I think there's a lot of different ways to utilize his offense. It's just that what's preventing him from being the full package offensively is the fact that he is extremely contact avoidant, and it shows up on his drives. It shows up around the rim, and I think that's the limiting factor as to why you can only have Nique Clifford so high on your board.
All right, so I have a couple numbers I want to throw at you guys, and I think this is going to really color. Again, I think Nique is someone who is not discussed with a ton of nuance all the time. So I do want to give his offense the proper shakedown. 95th percentile on 139 pick and roll possessions, 61.2% effective field goal rate, 17.3 turnover rate, free throw rate of 15.8. 95th percentile on isolation possessions, 60.2% effective field goal rate, only a 5.8% turnover rate, 15.4% free throw rate. 42nd percentile on what do you guys think? What spot of the floor was he only in the 42nd percentile?
At the rim?
I should say play type, not spot.
Oh, play type.
Contested catch and shoot threes?
It's a shot type.
Oh, open? Or no. So it's not shot.
Spot ups. Just spot ups.
Just spot ups?
Just spot ups. He was in the 42nd percentile on spot ups. Now, this includes drives and shots. But his biggest issue right now is that he is fucking awful attacking closeouts. He is a horrendous closeout attacker. He is a really good cutter and a really good off-ball mover, and I think he's a good shooter. When it comes to shooting, he's in the 71st percentile on 123 catch and shoot attempts. He was in the 88th percentile on 141 off the dribble attempts. He was a good shooter last year. He even improved this year. He's not a particularly natural shooter. It's definitely like a learned type of shot, but he took movement shots, and he took a lot. He was a high volume shooter. He was their go-to scorer. He has a real sense for getting open. He has a real sense for getting his body oriented towards the rim. The mechanics themselves are a little weird, but he's an elite off-ball mover and relocator. That's what really matters to me. The way I said it is the mechanics, they kind of look like they're built in a lab rather than being like natural, but he's confident. I don't think he is like an elite shooter, but again, I think he could be the type of shooter that like a Contavious Caldwell Pope is, or not is last year, but has been when he was really good. He can be a good enough shooter to legitimately be a 3-and-D guy. The thing I think a lot of people are misevaluating is that he is not the traditional 3-and-D guy, in that he is not someone who is going to be able to stand there in the corner and just make shots and attack closeout. Like closeout attacking is a big part of gravity as a shooter, and he doesn't have that. So because he doesn't have that, you will have to manufacture that gravity in another way. Maybe that's with off-ball movement and setting screens for him. Or more likely, it's with him as a true like secondary creator. There's some good and bad with that. For what it's worth, as a finisher, he was really efficient. 65.9% effective field goal rate on rim attempts, 23 for 25 on dunks, 77th percentile on layups with a 61.3% effective field goal rate. In the half court, it didn't really go down that much. 65.9% total to 65.6% in the half court. 61% on layups. He is a good finisher statistically, and he has been over the course of his career. But it's important to note where those come from. He's a really good cutter. He has really good operating handoffs as a scorer. What he is not great at right now, in my opinion, is operating handoffs as a passer. He has his moments, but his passing and playmaking is very much he can't his handle with his handle, and part of why he's a bad closeout attacker is because he's so skinny. Like Stone said, he's weak, and as soon as he gets bumped, he has to kill his dribble. And if he's farther out on the floor, he doesn't like to pick up his dribble and like come to jump stops or make reads. He wants to jump and throw a pass. And so he is pretty good at knowing where his guys are and finding his shooters, but he's also consistently kind of getting himself in trouble. In terms of trying to find out where I fall on Nique offensively, I think that there is a ceiling here that is not crazy high, not like all-star high, but is like someone who can legitimately be like a tertiary option with the ball in his hands. What I think would be, but what I don't love offensively is I don't think there's like a crazy high floor in terms of, man, you can just kind of, quote unquote, stick him in the corner. One, because I don't think he's that level of defender, but two, because those types of guys are better closeout attackers or better cutters or whatever. No, I shouldn't say better cutters because he is a great cutter. He's a great vertical athlete, including off the dribble. He dunked 10 times off the dribble in the half court. Or no, excuse me. He dunked 10 times in the half. Hold on. Where did I do that? It was 9 self-created half-court dunks, 6 in kind of isolation or PNR settings, and then 3 were closeout attacks. So, I mean, he can, get on top of the rim. Now, he was playing in the Mountain West. That's worth noting. So there's just kind of all these disparate elements with Nique that I don't think are often talked about crazy well. And I think his role is fairly specific. He's a shooting guard, and he has to do the shooting guard things really well, which is has to guard at the point of the attack, make some plays as an off-ball rotator, not be someone that, they want to make a low man. I think he does those things well enough defensively. He can't fly around. He's not a great closeout guy. He's not that type of defender, but in terms of executing like traditional defense, I think he's going to be fine, especially drop defense. I think he's going to be fine to good. As a shooter, I think he's going to make open shots. I think he can even be the type of guy you run some movement stuff for, but I don't think he's a good enough closeout attacker that he is going to give you enough gravity if he is just standing still in spots on the floor. I think you have to get him moving. And I also think to be a really actual solid NBA player, he has to continue to improve as a pick and roll player and as a DHO operator, because that's going to be a big part of the sell, I think, for NBA teams to use him is, hey, he has to get some usage as that type of player, because the truth is shooting guards don't get away with being stand in the corner guys. Small forwards and power forwards do. Shooting guards, even the quote unquote worst ones, even the ones that are lower usage and are just out there for their defense or whatever, have to do more. Alex Caruso is more of a playmaker than you realize. Lou Dort is more of a bigger part of the Thunder offense than you realize. Other shooting guards in the league are Kentavious Caldwell-Pope when he played for the Nuggets, more of a part of the offense than you realize. All that stuff matters. So Nique has to hit like because of how he's kind of smaller, he's not super strong, he's not a 3. He has to kind of hit higher marks. I'm still willing to swing on it. And for me, I would draft him in the first round. I think he's a tier below Carter Bryant and like a guy like Rasheer Fleming. I think I'm going to have him in the same tier as Jace Richardson and Colin Murray Boyle and guys like that. I'm not in love with Nique the way I thought I might be, but I just think if he hits, he's the type of guy I really value, where he can do enough offensively to be a third type guy on offense. And he's the type of defender I kind of value, where he's good on the ball. And even though he can't fly around and make a ton of plays, like he's going to really execute. He's just really smart. And he's long and he's athletic. I think he's tough. I think he is pretty unselfish. He plays, he plays in a way that I think will fit on a lot of NBA teams. And I also think he is a more scheme versatile guy than 2 of the guys we will talk about after this. He can fit on more teams and be a part of winning basketball in a variety of ways, in a way those guys really, I think, I'm not as sold on. So I like Nique, but I don't love it. I thought he was going to be a surefire lottery guy. in most classes, I think I'd be, I'd want to take him 15 to 20, maybe even a little later. But in this class, he'll probably end up like a borderline lottery pick. But I'm not like jumping up and down to take him in the lottery. Coop, where are you at with Nique? I know I talked for a really long time there.
No worries. I think I'll have him just outside the lottery. I think I do worry about the age. He was 2 years younger doing this kind of stuff, or if he was doing it against Power 5 schools consistently, or Power 4, I guess now, whatever. If he was doing it more consistently against higher level comp, I would be super, super in on him. I'd be like super high level, all in. Just a few too many red flags for me to be fully sold on Nique, the big red dilf. So I I got stoned with that one. I knew I would. That, like you talked about, the off-ball stuff defensively, I think there's just so much bankable skill on offense. I think he's a perfect bet at a dribble, pass, shoot, off-ball wing that, as much as we want to think about like the two's kind of dead, he's the kind of two that really works where they're like functionally a three in the way that threes have to play. He's just a little smaller. Twos are scoring, two guards are dead. You're either a point guard or you're an undersized three. And I think Nique Clifford is the perfect undersized three for the modern NBA and be a pretty high level role player. So, Stone, where are you at, my man? Close us out.
Yeah, I think there's more offensive roles that I buy for Nique than I think Bryce does, where I think that he can be a guy that feels like a Grayson Allen role for the Suns, like he did a couple years ago, where he shot really, really well. Like I think Nique has the potential to be that level of shooter. I think there's secondary and tertiary different outcomes for him offensively. One thing I didn't note is that offensively, when he is driving to the rim, and his last move is a move where he is avoiding contact, like he's turning away from the basket or just doing a weird contortion to get away from there. The accuracy really seems to plummet. And so that's just a final note I had where I think that is somewhat really makes the finishing extra concerning for me, because if your whole thing is contact avoidance and your final move of contact avoidance makes your depth perception really poor around the rim, the finishing then becomes a big issue. So I'm drafting Nique Clifford, never expecting him to be a positive finisher, is basically where I'm coming down. But I think everything else could be really good, or has the potential to be. I also think that at the age that he's at, turning 24 during his rookie season, he probably has 2 years max to crack an NBA rotation before he's out of the league. And that's not always easy to do, but I feel decently confident in the offense being a positive, not so much the defense, where I think I don't feel confident in him being anything more than a neutral in any sort of defensive role. But there's positives and negatives that he brings in different areas on that end. So overall, I have him 14th on my board currently, where I think that he is not – he's just below my lottery tier despite being 14th. I have 13 guys in my lotto tier, and he's 14th as a guy that's like a first-round lock for me in pretty much every draft. But numerically, the way my board falls so far this year, I'll have him 14th just below Kaman Malawach, who's in tier above.
So did we all end with him in like basically the same spot?
Yeah.
Basically, all that just to agree.
I was just doing the math in my head. I was like, yeah, we all had him like 13, 14. Like it's all kind of the same shit. Anyways, okay. No, this.
Thank you so much for listening to the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast here on YouTube. If you want to check out more of our stuff, you can follow us on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. You can check out our website, upsideswings.com. You can follow all of us on Twitter, subscribe here on YouTube for more content coming down the line. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts on this pod and, our process in the comments. We'll see you next time. Thank you.